My dear friends, if you have ever been irritated, wounded, or even outraged by another, you are not alone. The world is full of sharp edges and thoughtless tongues, and it is all too easy to take offense. But what if I told you there is a secret? A secret that, once grasped, can free you from the exhausting cycle of anger and frustration. You see, the first and most important thing to understand is this: you have no control over others, only yourself. We bristle at rude words, thoughtless actions, and the inconsiderate behavior of those around us. But why? Did we imagine that others owed us kindness? That they should conform to our expectations? There is the mistake. The moment you expect the world to treat you fairly, you have already surrendered your peace to the whims of others. We live under the grand illusion that if only people behaved as they should, if only they spoke with kindness, acted with wisdom, and treated us as we deserve, then we would finally be at peace. But what a fragile and impossible condition that is. For if our peace depends on the conduct of others, then we are slaves to forces beyond our control. Consider how often we find ourselves upset not because of what we have done, but because of what someone else has said or failed to say, what they have done or neglected to do. We give away our serenity as if it were theirs to command, and yet if we pause for but a moment, we will see how foolish it is to expect that we can mold the world to fit our comfort. People are unpredictable. They have their own desires, their own pains, their own blind spots. Some are careless, some are unthinking, and some are simply carrying burdens too heavy for them to behave well. If we spend our lives expecting them to act in a way that suits our peace, we will be forever disappointed. A man who walks through a thorn bush and curses the thorns for pricking him achieves nothing but his own misery. It is not the nature of thorns to be smooth. In the same way, it is not the nature of people to always be kind, fair, or even reasonable, and yet we resist this truth. We bristle at the slightest insult. We seethe when someone is inconsiderate. We allow the mere words of another to darken our day. But here is a startling realization. They have done nothing to us that we have not permitted. If a man walks up to you and says something cruel, the words are his. Why then do you take them into yourself as if they are yours to carry? If a child throws a stone at a tree, does the tree shake with indignation? No, it remains as it was, unaffected, unmoved. And yet we who consider ourselves wiser than trees allow ourselves to be disturbed by passing words and fleeting slights. The secret, then, is this: we must surrender the illusion of control. We must accept once and for all that the world will not always accommodate us, and that people will not always treat us as we wish. This is not a cause for despair, but for liberation. For if we release the burden of trying to change others, if we abandon the impossible task of demanding perfection from the world, we will find that nothing outside ourselves has the power to disturb us. This does not mean we become indifferent or uncaring. No, it means we gain wisdom. When someone speaks harshly, we see it for what it is, a reflection of their own heart, not of ours. When we are slighted, we do not take offense, for we recognize that another's actions are their own and need not dictate our emotions. We learn to walk through life as one who is untouchable, not because we are blind to the faults of others, but because we no longer expect them to be any different than they are. There is a strange paradox here. When we stop expecting others to behave a certain way, we begin to understand them better. We see their struggles, their wounds, and their own illusions of control. And in seeing them clearly, we find that our irritation fades. Instead of anger, we feel compassion. Instead of frustration, we feel patience. We become, in a sense, free. Imagine, if you will, a man who no longer takes offense, who no longer allows the words and actions of others to disturb his peace. He walks through life untroubled, not because the world is kind to him, but because he has learned that his peace is his own to guard. Such a man is not weak. On the contrary, he is stronger than kings, for his kingdom is within, and no man can overthrow it. How often do we take offense at the words or actions of others, believing they were meant to wound us? A friend forgets to return a call, and we assume neglect. A stranger speaks harshly, and we take it as a personal slight. A co-worker receives praise while we are overlooked, and we stew in quiet resentment. In each case, we interpret these moments as deliberate attacks on our dignity, as if the world has conspired against us. But if we pause, if we strip away our assumptions and look at things clearly, we will see a profound truth. Most offenses are not personal. People are by nature preoccupied with their own struggles. A man who speaks curtly may be weighed down by unseen burdens. A friend who seems distant may be lost in their own troubles, their silence having nothing to do with us. Even an insult, which seems so directly aimed at wounding, often comes not from careful malice, but from the offender's own insecurities, frustrations, or ignorance. If we could see the full picture, if we could glimpse into the heart of the one who wronged us, we might find that their action had little to do with us at all. And if this is true, then what is the point of taking offense? To take offense is to hand over our peace to another. It is to say, your words or actions have the power to disturb me, to dictate how I feel. But why should this be so? Why should the careless remark of another have the ability to darken our mood? If a passerby on the street shouts an insult, is it truly worth our energy to dwell on it? Do we imagine that their words carry some deep truth, or do we simply bristle because our pride has been poked? And if we know their insult is meaningless, why not treat it as such? A gust of wind may blow dust in our eyes, but we do not become angry at the wind. We merely brush the dust away and move on. The problem, of course, is that we are quick to assume malice where there is none. We take an oversight as an intentional slight, a disagreement as an attack, a piece of criticism as a condemnation. But this habit only brings suffering. If we could train ourselves to first consider another explanation, to ask whether there might be no offense intended at all, we would spare ourselves much unnecessary pain. Even when an action is meant to hurt us, what do we gain by taking the bait? Does our anger change the offender? Does our wounded pride make us stronger? No, it only binds us in chains of resentment. What then is the solution? It is simple, though not always easy. We must detach from the impulse to personalize everything. We must step outside ourselves and see the world not as a theater where we are the main character, but as a vast landscape where each person moves according to their own burdens, joys, and blind spots. In doing so, we gain clarity. We stop seeing offenses everywhere, and we begin to notice something else instead: humanity. We see that others are just as flawed as we are, just as prone to error, just as lost in their own struggles, and when we see this, our irritation fades. Imagine a life where you are no longer disturbed by what others say or do, where you no longer take every slight to heart, no longer allow your peace to be stolen by the actions of another. This life is possible, but it requires a shift in perspective. The next time you feel slighted, pause, ask yourself, was this truly about me, or was this simply another human being, acting out of their own nature, their own struggles, their own blindness? More often than not, you will find that the offense you were ready to carry was never yours to bear in the first place. Pride is a subtle master, an invisible chain that binds us tighter than we realize. It whispers to us that we are important, that we deserve better, that others ought to recognize our worth. And when they fail to do so, when someone speaks to us dismissively, when we are overlooked, when our opinions are ignored, it stirs in us a deep sense of offense. How dare they treat me this way, we think. Don't they know who I am? But herein lies the truth that few are willing to face. The root of nearly all our anger and irritation is not the fault of others, but the demands of our own pride. Consider this. When someone interrupts us mid-sentence, what makes us bristle? It is not the mere act of interruption, but the feeling that we have been disrespected, that we were not given the attention we believe we deserve. When we are slighted in public, it is not the slight itself that wounds us most. It is the idea that others may have witnessed it, that our status has somehow been diminished in their eyes. We do not rage over small inconveniences simply because they exist. We rage because we believe they should not happen to us. We imagine that the universe should grant us special exemption from the rudeness, carelessness, or thoughtlessness that afflict others. But why should it? Who promised us such immunity? Now, let us suppose that we strip this pride away. Let us imagine for a moment that we are humble. Truly humble, not in the false way of merely pretending to be modest while inwardly feeling superior, but in the deep and genuine way of expecting nothing. What happens then? A man cuts in front of us in line. Do we feel slighted? No, because we never assumed we deserved better treatment than anyone else. Someone speaks harshly to us. Do we burn with indignation? No, because we do not assume that our dignity is so fragile as to be wounded by mere words. We become, in effect, untouchable, not because others no longer act poorly, but because we no longer give them the power to disturb us. This is not weakness. Many believe that to let go of pride is to become a doormat, to invite mistreatment. But the opposite is true. A proud man is easily controlled, for his emotions are at the mercy of how others treat him. A single insult can ruin his day. A perceived slight can throw him into anger or sulking. He is, in truth, a puppet, whose strings are pulled by the words and actions of others. But the man who has cast aside pride, he is free. Insults bounce off him like arrows striking a stone. Rudeness does not touch him, for he never assumed people would be kind. His emotions belong to him alone, not to the shifting moods of those around him. To live in such a way requires a great shift in perspective. We must first recognize how much of our anger and irritation is born not from genuine injustice, but from wounded pride. We must learn to laugh at our own ego, to see how small and unnecessary it is, and above all, we must cultivate humility, not a false, performative humility, but a real and lasting one, the kind that expects nothing, demands nothing, and therefore is never shaken. If we achieve this, we will find that life is suddenly much lighter. The words and actions of others lose their power over us. The world, once full of offenses and slights, becomes a place of peace. We do not need others to treat us well in order to be happy, because our happiness no longer depends on them, and in the end, we will realize something astonishing. The secret to never being angered or bothered was never about changing others. It was about changing ourselves. Detachment is a concept that many misunderstand. It is not coldness, nor is it indifference. It does not mean that we stop caring about people or that we withdraw from life. True detachment is something far greater. It is the ability to remain unshaken, to move through life without allowing the words and actions of others to disturb our peace. It is the quiet strength of a man who is no longer ruled by his ego, no longer at the mercy of others' opinions or behaviors. And once we grasp this, we realize something profound. No one truly has the power to bother us unless we allow them to. Most people spend their lives reacting. Someone speaks rudely and they grow angry. Someone ignores them and they feel slighted. Someone offends and they carry resentment. It is as if their emotions are tied to puppet strings, pulled this way and that by whoever happens to cross their path. They believe they have no choice in the matter, that their anger, irritation, or hurt feelings are natural responses to external events. But this is an illusion. No one can place emotions inside us, we place them there ourselves. What happens to us is one thing, how we interpret it, how we respond, is another. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through a crowded street. A stranger bumps into you and keeps walking without a word. Do you become angry? Some would. They might mutter under their breath or glare after the person, feeling disrespected. But now imagine a different perspective. What if the stranger was lost in thought, burdened by a deep personal sorrow, unaware of his surroundings? Would your anger not fade into understanding? And if that is the case, then was the anger necessary at all? The event did not change, only your interpretation of it. This is the key to detachment. It is not about ignoring what happens. It is about refusing to let it dictate your emotions. When we detach from our ego and expectations, we begin to see that most of our suffering is self-inflicted. We expect people to behave a certain way, and when they do not, we take it as an offense. We assume that others should treat us with kindness, and when they fail to, we let their actions disturb our peace. But if we let go of these expectations, we become untouchable. We no longer assume that the world owes us consideration, and therefore we are not shaken when we do not receive it. Detachment is not passive, it is an active choice. It is the choice to step back, to observe instead of react, to let go instead of cling. It does not mean we do not care, it means we care wisely. A man who is detached can still love deeply, can still act with kindness, can still engage fully with life, but he does so without being controlled by it. If someone insults him, he does not take it personally, because he understands that the words of another do not define him. If someone disappoints him, he does not dwell in resentment, because he never placed his happiness in their hands to begin with. There is great power in this way of living. The detached man is free in a way that few people ever experience. He does not waste energy on grudges or on trying to control what is beyond him. He does not allow small slights to ruin his peace. He moves through life with a quiet steadiness, untouched by the pettiness of others. And the most remarkable thing is this: by refusing to be bothered, he also becomes someone who no longer bothers others. He does not lash out, does not seek revenge, does not contribute to the cycle of anger. In mastering himself, he transforms not only his own experience, but the world around him. In the end, we must ask ourselves, do we wish to remain slaves to every passing irritation, or do we wish to be free? The path to freedom is clear. We must detach, not from life, not from love, but from the idea that we must react to everything. We must learn that our peace is ours to protect, that no one else can take it from us unless we give it away. And once we embrace this truth, we will find that the world, for all its noise and chaos, can no longer disturb the quiet within us. Forgiveness is often spoken of as a virtue, a noble act of kindness extended to those who have wronged us. But far too many misunderstand its true purpose. It is not merely about being generous to others, nor is it about excusing bad behavior. The real power of forgiveness lies in its ability to set us free. To hold on to resentment is to carry a weight that only burdens the one who bears it. It is a chain that binds, a poison that seeps into the soul, corroding our peace and turning our thoughts toward bitterness. And yet so many refuse to let go, believing that holding on to their anger somehow serves justice. But what does resentment truly achieve? If someone wrongs us, does our bitterness undo the offense? If we replay the moment in our minds, nursing our wounds, does it heal them? On the contrary, it only deepens the injury. We suffer not only from the initial harm, but from the countless times we relive it. The one who wronged us may have moved on, but we remain trapped, shackled to the past by our unwillingness to release the pain. And here is the great irony. In refusing to forgive, we do not punish the offender, we punish ourselves. To forgive, then, is not to say that what happened was acceptable. It is not to deny that harm was done. Rather, it is to recognize that we have a choice. We can either carry the burden of our resentment, allowing it to weigh us down, or we can set it aside and walk forward in freedom. Forgiveness is the quiet decision to say, I will not let this define me. I will not let this steal my peace. Many resist forgiveness because they feel it is undeserved. How can I forgive when they have not apologized? When they have shown no remorse, they ask. But this is to misunderstand forgiveness entirely. It is not a gift we give to another. It is a gift we give to ourselves. To wait for an apology is to remain chained to the offender, to let our peace be dependent upon their actions. But why should our freedom be placed in their hands? Why should our happiness be delayed until they see their error? We do not forgive because the other deserves it. We forgive because we deserve peace.